Yeah, it's 4 o'clock, and let's just start with a few basics on me, on the company. Also presenting our speaker today, Emily Lannon, and I will set the webinar rules, so to speak, so we're all on the same speech. So as I already said to the ones who already came here a bit earlier, my name is Anja. I work for Kenjo as a senior content writer, and Kenjo is an HR software with offices in Madrid and Berlin. And we basically, we offer the software for time tracking and other features I will get to right in a second. But let me start to say thank you for taking your time to join us today. And thank you so much for sending in all your questions to the ones who did. As I said, you guys, you can question us or send your questions here in the chat forum anytime. I will collect them and will represent them later in the email, in the webinar here once the Q&A round is coming up. Also, we invited Emily Lannon here to talk with us. And once I've finished here with my little spiel on presenting, she will talk about preparing for a split world in a post-corona environment. This will last roughly 1 hour. And we do it in English because we want to be inclusive of all non-native speakers who attend this webinar. Emily will give a general review of all the related subjects, and we will record this webinar, and in the next few days we will send you a follow-up email with a link to the recording and also a PDF to the presentation right now you're gonna see. Basically, let me tell you a few things about Kenjo. So Emily, if you could just
Yes.
go one notch deeper into the next slide. We are a company focusing on community engagement, also kind of revolutionizing the workforce, and also one of our most pressuring questions, how to boost employee engagement inside and outside the office, which right now with COVID was a really pressuring subject. And for us, it's really important to make people feel comfortable going back to work into the office, but also being in at home, working from home. And to do that, at Kenjo, we provide tools to make this happening smoothly. For example, with our software, if you can just go one more slide, this is the last slide, I'm going to ask you to go down to the next slide, Emily, please. With our software, employees can, for example, clock in and clock out without cards. Since the interaction of employees should be touchless, well, in the foreseeable future, 1.5 meter social distancing also means to not just slide your cards to clock in and out into the company. So if hundreds of people do that every morning, that could be a potential risk as well. So we at Kenjo, we have a QR code you can see in the picture where this is all done on a touchless subject. But then also how to make them feel like a community when working from home during Corona. People can do that with our meeting feature, where you can stay in touch with your team on a regular basis. For example, I just started recently with Kenjo in the heights of Corona pandemics, where basically I spent 2 or 3 weeks in the office and then barely meeting them in person. But actually, if we at Kenjo, we meet regular with those meeting features for business meetings, but also to just have a cup of coffee and actually getting to know people, having that extra feeling of family touch, of friend touch, which is very important in an environment of offices. Also, for example, with our performance review features, it's a great way to not only help people give feedback, but to also boost engagement between employees. It also works like a news feed where the company can announce important news and praise employees, for example, who just won a sales pitch or anything you want. If you would like to try out our features and our tool in total, we offer a free 14 days trial to work with all our features. And you can basically sign up with us here right away, or after the webinar when we send out the follow-up email. So having that out of the system, we can talk about focus about the webinar, talking about the management of returning to workplace transition after COVID-19. So for that, we have invited Emily Lannon to hold the webinar as a speaker. Emily has worked as a head of EU community experience at Wayfair for some time now, and she has many years of experience in that field. So she's a real expert, and she's happy to answer all your questions in regards to that. She will give tips on the logistics of how to prepare the workplace, and then on how to build contingency plans over the next year. And in the end, as I already mentioned, there will be a Q&A to ask questions. Just bear in mind, we just have 1 hour and already talked a few minutes now, so we don't have time to answer all the questions. But if you're really pressuring, also in the end, you have contact details. You can contact me or Emily personally. And yeah, now I hand over the microphone to Emily, and let's start.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. I just wanted to quickly talk again about what we would be chatting about today. So first and foremost, that all of the information we're talking about today is from a collective brain. We're building this path together. There's a question of why would we go back to the office at all? The fact that we're playing a statistics game, the fact that we need to design for risk, that I'll be encouraging talking about a split, building your contingency plans, building community once you have split your workforce, ensuring programs that are fun but also functional, and then addressing some of the questions that were sent ahead of time, which is what happens if? And then we'll have time for a Q&A. So to go back to what I said before, the first thing that I want to say, and this is such a fun new experience, I'm not having stage fright for the first time. Zoom fright is a whole new thing, but I can fiddle with my pen and you will never know. But the reality here is that all of my years of expertise within the workplace are not necessarily relevant. We're all inventing this entire topic together. Every single person, every single article, it's been 2.5 months of research and questioning and asking everybody in the field, because we're all working on this together. So I want to acknowledge first and foremost that I'm not offering anything that's necessarily unique. All of my thoughts and ideas and the actions that we've taken are based on the readings and thoughts and thought leaders that are existing in the world. To support that, I wanted to share 4 articles that specifically I found particularly powerful. And again, you'll be given all of these resources afterwards so that you can read some of the inspiration for this talk. So why would we go back at all? We all recognize that we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And at least at Wayfair, we still believe that the safest possible place for our employees is for them to continue working at home. That said, we do have employees who feel as if they have legitimate business or personal needs for why they need to come back to the office. Some of the cases that we're specifically looking at are internet and ability to actually effectively work from home. And this has been a specific issue for some of our employees in Berlin, who might live in old apartments that have thicker walls and it's not as easy for them to have strong internet connections, or for many companies in Berlin who have recently hired expats and it takes a month or two to even get internet properly set up in your office. There's mental well-being and health for people who maybe have moved to Berlin because they're very excited about the social interactions that are possible here. And all of a sudden they've found themselves completely isolated and alone, thousands of miles away from their families and friends in a city that they don't know very well, and they're starting to struggle. Or perhaps it's their physical well-being and their actual technical setup in the space that they're in. So one of the things that we're really evaluating every single day is the fact that we're playing a statistics game. And I'm very grateful for people much smarter than myself who have figured out these green light systems and ways to evaluate what's happening and advise us whether or not they feel like it's safe to go back. As many people on this call are probably aware, the German government specifically is looking at the reproduction factor for the disease. They're looking at how many people within a group of 100,000 people are getting sick, and then how many urgent care emergency beds are available. And so using those as kind of their green lights. So one of the things that I'm actively doing every day is watching those infection rates. And right now, they're very low. So in Berlin specifically, it's oscillating day by day between 23, maybe 36 cases a day. Now, one of the things that is fluctuating quite a bit, and the German government has basically said that's normal when the infection rates are so low, is this R factor, which basically says for every 10 people that are sick, they might get 7 people sick, or they might get 9 to 15 people sick, depending on what that ratio is. So again, I went to an engineering friend and I was like, help me understand this. Like, what could this tangibly mean for my team? So let's assume Wayfair has 1,000 employees in Berlin. And let's assume that we have 36 cases every single day and that the R factor stays and maintains in that one range. If all of those factors stay the same, which of course is a leap of faith and highly unlikely, but if it was to stay the same, we could safely guess that about 4 to 7 of our employees over the next year would contract the coronavirus. That personally gives me quite a bit of hope insofar as it's relatively safe right now out there for us to consider opening our offices again and providing an environment for those people who specifically would like to come back. And we can increase those chances of making that safe by making sure we're implementing general standards so that people are educated and using proper safety in order to interact with each other. So the first thing that we have to do is design for risk. And I choose this photograph because it makes me smile and because it's the #1 thing that I and all of my colleagues and basically everybody I know misses. We miss each other. We miss our friendships. We miss our colleagues. We miss high fives. We miss cheersing at restaurants. They're these very simple things that instinctually are going to be incredibly difficult for people walking back into an environment they know to change their behaviors on. So one of the things when you're thinking about your workplace, you're thinking about how can I design to specifically help people not do exactly what they want to do. I recently went back to the office and I know firsthand how difficult it is because for the first time in 3 months, I got to see some of my team members as they were doing an amazing job setting up the office, and I couldn't hug them. I couldn't really say hi. We had to sort of wave from afar. And so it's interesting being the person who designs these programs and to feel myself how difficult it's going to be to live them myself. And if it's a hard standard for me, it's going to be a hard standard for a lot of people. So again, setting up your space for behavior change. We interviewed 820 of our employees to try and understand how well were they working at home, what were some of their needs. And as you can see from the graph, there's actually a really good chunk of our population who feels like they're doing just fine at home. When we asked what would be the #1 reason people would want to come back, 39% said they wanted social interaction, which again is the #1 thing that we have to be really careful about designing for to help keep people safe. So the most important thing, and I'm sure everybody has this, is just to have a plan. Identify the few people in your organization who can help you build that plan, create that team, and identify what are the different steps that you as an organization need to take in order to be able to open your space and welcome people back in safely. This is a quick screenshot of our plan. Our plan is 8 pages long. It's about 820 lines of action items. We're a very large organization with 10 floors and 1,000 people. And so this isn't going to be true necessarily for everybody, but it does give you an idea about the scope in which you can start to think about this as a problem to tackle. So I would be remiss if I didn't start this presentation with the very basics. And they're the very basics that I know everybody knows. But before anybody can even come close to the office, we need to make sure that they know social distancing is incredibly important. Social interactions need to be limited as much as possible. They should wear masks at any time they're interacting with other people, and proper hand hygiene is the #1 way in which we can all stay safe. 20-second hand washing is even stronger than antibacterial gel, but making sure that people are disinfecting regularly. So I'm going to go into a little bit of the more functional, operational side of how to set up an office and some things that we're thinking about. It may or may not be applicable to where you're at as an organization, but I do think it's helpful to think through some of the different options that you might have. In our first phase, to ensure social distancing, we've mapped out, these are CAD plans, and in the first phase, we've mapped it out so each of the desks has the 1.5 social distancing required in order to have space to return to work. Additionally to that though, to ensure that there's better airflow for individuals, we're having everybody face the same direction. When people are facing each other, there are all sorts of articles and statistics about how far human particles go just with talking. So on breathing, you have a certain amount of particulate travel, on talking, on shouting. And as you might have recently read about some churches in southern Germany, even singing, the projection of the human voice is actually incredibly powerful. The first thing after reading that article that I said to my executive team was, I promise no singing in the office. And so while we want to make sure people are feeling joyful while they're at work, maybe we'll cut back our karaoke nights. But one thing to consider in all seriousness is to have people facing in one direction. Right now, Wayfair is really quite lucky. Of the people that we surveyed, a very low percentage actually expressed the need to come back to the office immediately. Which allows us to spread people out significantly throughout the building. As the months go by, and as this crisis and disease continues hopefully to stabilize, those numbers are likely to go up, and more people will ask to come to work from the office. Our second phase will be to stagger the seats so that everyone is still facing in the same direction, but that some people are maybe working Monday, Wednesday, some people are working Tuesday, Friday, whatever it happens to be. But that way we can have a higher amount of different employees able to come to the office at different time and utilize the breaks that they're needing to have through this new physical space, but still keeping people facing the one direction and not sharing desk space. By not sharing desk space, you're cutting down on janitorial costs, because as good as any janitorial team might be, wiping down spaces to make sure that there's no trace of any kind of disease is going to be difficult to guarantee. Unfortunately, this is not a visible disease. And then last but not least, our third phase is what we're calling 1.5 foot staggering. And this is much more of the typical way in which you would set up an office space, but it does have people facing each other. We've identified this as being a very risky way to start off. And so we're gonna wait as long as we possibly can. There are some companies that I've been reading about that are progressing with this because you can get much higher occupancy with this model, but then they're putting plastic plexiglass in between the desks to help with that particulate airflow. Continuing on the theme of setting up your space for behavior change, thinking through all the different touch points. So the touch points that Wayfair has specifically identified as our highest risks are our kitchens. We had very popular espresso machines that everybody loved to line up for and touch the screen and get their perfect macchiato or whatever it happened to be. So we've closed down our kitchens. And in this photograph, what you can see is there's actually a large bistro that we've cut off both sides with these new one and done snack shops stops. The idea being we are cutting off the social zones that people would naturally want to gather in to have a little chat. The cliche of gathering at the water cooler is exactly what we're trying to design against. So here on either side of the bistro, so that either side of the wings of the building can now have their own one-stop shop. They can come and they can get single serve snacks, single serve sparkling water or still water. The coffee is now in single serve espressos, as well as little small dairy containers. Is it the high-end, amazing, wonderful creature comfort experience that we had wanted to have initially and before? No, but we do believe it to be the safest option for now as we learn through this transition phase. Bathrooms are another space that are not designed for social distancing. And so specifically cutting off areas where when people are going to wash their hands, it might not occur to them, because you want to wash your hands as quickly as possible, that they shouldn't wash their hands right that second, but that they should wait back on the line while that other person finishes washing their hands. And so we've closed off areas to help with that social distancing. Social zones, the same thing. We've actually closed phone booths because our phone booths don't have great air circulation, and we want to make sure that people have space that is as clear as possible. And the bistro and kitchen areas where people really tended to gather, we've closed down. One of the things we want to ensure our people continue to do is move. It's really important that people don't stand and chat at somebody's desk. And so we've tried to tape the space in a way that helped encourage that movement. And when, for some reason, let's say, let's hope this doesn't happen, there's a line for the new coffee machine, we've placed indicators for people to understand how they can wait in a safe distance. Also making sure to work with your landlords. Your landlords have a responsibility to ensure that your public areas are taped, whether it's the stairwells, the elevators, the elevator lobbies, or maybe just the lobby entering the building. Those are important areas that are their responsibility. And so working with your landlord to make sure they're taking care of that for you. Now, it's always also important to have a little bit of fun with this. One of the things that's not shown in this picture is in an elevator, the best and safest way to be in an elevator is actually to face the wall, which is not interesting or fun for anybody. And so everybody's already socially distanced. We're actually putting up posters that are replaceable. And every week we'll have new funny quizzes, we'll have games, we'll have the American reference is Where's Waldo, which is a little puzzle where you're trying to like find somebody. And the idea being giving people that visual reminder of, oh, I don't want to be facing the main out area where everybody's breathing. I actually want to be facing this wall and taking a look at something so I'm not exchanging particulates with the people around me. So going back to having a little bit of fun with it, we have an opportunity to laugh at the fact that this is tough. This is hard. Nobody's happy about the fact that they can't use the espresso machine that they love, and they can't use the microwave or the fridge in the ways that they're used to. And so the fact that we're all in this together and that we're all collectively designing something to keep each other as safe as possible gives us an opportunity, as the Brits would say, to be a little bit more cheeky. And so at Wayfair, we're taking this opportunity to have a little bit of fun with people who are in the office because their home environment wasn't appropriate for them, and that we can engage with them on a humorous level, even if it's not in person. My team's not there making a joke with them in the elevator, but we can leave a sign that maybe makes them smile. And then I'd like to talk about encouraging, and I might even say mandating, a split. We've already talked about the fact that you're probably going to have to split your organization just due to occupancy levels. If Wayfair took the 1.5 meters per person, we would only actually be able to have 23% of our occupancy back in the building. That's an incredibly low percentage of our employees. So until things change and government guidance changes, we know our organization at least is going to need to split between those people working at home and those people working in the office. I would encourage, and this is not a popular decision, I would encourage splitting your teams even within the office once they return. When teammates see each other, they want to hang out. They want to spend time together. They want to brainstorm. They want to discuss in a conference room whatever they need to discuss. That's the normal way of working. Wayfair is taking the decision that every person who applies for access, we actually take down their team name and where they sat before and purposely reassign them to a different place and to a different area than where the rest of their teammates are sitting. And then we're limiting them to that floor. Again, we have 10 floors. Yes, will those people likely go out to lunch together? 100%. That's okay. What people do in their own time is not something that we're trying to design for. What we're trying to do is create a safe environment in the office and also allow us to track very quickly if for some reason a case is found. We have isolated people into teams, into sections, not working teams, but spatial teams. And so we can contact people very quickly if there's ever an issue. And building a contingency plan. We are currently starting to slowly phase back into the office, into restaurants, into gyms, into spas, into kindergartens. There's a lot of unknowns. I would encourage everybody to take the learnings of everything you've already done in the last 3 months. You've put in a huge amount of effort and work into figuring out how to get people to work successfully from home. And for probably 80% of you and 80% of your teams, it actually worked. It was okay. People were okay. Knowing that we do not know what is going to happen or if the rates are going to raise back up, make sure you're ready to bring people back home. Make sure in language and in your communication, you're using words that leave that open as a path. I've been really amazed at how many of our employees do not seem to be reading the news at all and are very excited to get back into the office and very excited for life as normal. I want life as normal also. There's nothing I've enjoyed more over the past 2 weeks than getting to go to a restaurant and getting to be outside. But the reality is, if those rates rise back up, we will need to bring people back home. Make sure to communicate, make sure to educate, whatever the tools that you're using to make your decisions, news articles, research, whatever that information is, communicate that with your employees so that they understand where your decisions are coming from. So moving away from facilities and moving into communities, how to connect when divided through fun and functionality. So one of the things that's important as we talk about and assume that we've been able to successfully split our community, and some people are working from the office and some people are at home, the thing we want to make sure doesn't happen is that we all of a sudden have two completely separate communities that are kind of doing their own things. Now for me, the solve to this is actually quite easy because it's the same thing that, again, we've been doing for the last 3 months. Everything that you've been doing to make your people feel connected and part of a community in a digital environment is still really important because we're not ready to move fully physically. We have to remain fully digitally. And because we are still encouraging our employees who are in a physical space in the office to limit their social interactions, we want them to continue to have access to as rich of a digital community as possible. I'm sure all of you have these programs in place or programs that are even more fun and more interesting, but some of the things that Wayfair has done, I've listed here. One of the most successful outcomes of COVID-19 for Wayfair has been the fact that our international teams know each other now. We play with each other on trivia nights and joke days and theme days and mindfulness classes and master classes where we're sharing information. And that's been a huge win, that for the first time, people who didn't normally interact with each other really are getting to interact and to know each other. So I would continue to do the things that have made your team smile for the last 3 months, and begin to think of that more as permanent programming that you're going to want to continue, because there are so many far-reaching benefits that it has. Team themes is an idea that one of my colleagues came up with, and 1 week was fancy dress week. 1 week was bring something back from nature and tell a story of it. This week was actually what are the strangest photos on your phone from COVID. And it's a way that our team can continue to connect, share, and laugh, and have something that isn't work related every day in our daily stand-up. And then getting a little bit more tangible. So we've talked about the importance of the digital world, but the reality is it's summertime. And I'm sure everybody on this call has loved nothing more than sitting out in a beer garden or whatever your equivalent is, and having sparkling water to a sparkling soda to a sparkling wine and enjoying that time. So I think it's important that we start to recognize that people have a deep need for change and for interacting with nature, as well as human interaction as well. So I'm just going to talk about Wayfair's summer plans that we have as an office. And again, a lot of these ideas were actually taken from other companies that are doing really interesting things. So in June, we're going to be sending out small little touches to our employees as physical packs that they actually receive in their homes. If there are any employees in the office, they would also make sure that they were getting them as well. And these packs might be designed for family activities so that people can get out with their children, their partners, or on their own. And so we'll have different types of things that are sent. Some of it will be tangible. Maybe they're fun colored sunglasses because it's getting sunny outside. One of our fun ideas that we're particularly excited about is a social distancing picnic blanket in Wayfair colors, so that people can put it out in a park and remember, oh yeah, this is the right amount of distance that I should have between you and me. We can still hang out and enjoy this park time, but this is the space that we have. In July, we're really excited to get people out into their neighborhoods. More and more shops are opening up, and being able to support local businesses and be able to have small little scavenger incentives where people go out in their neighborhoods, connect with local businesses, but also potentially get little clues and things that will lead them to what we're hoping. Of course, everything is contingent upon what is happening with this disease, but we're hoping in August that we will be able to do what we're calling neighborhood block parties. The perk for us about the block party is it's not team-based. So again, necessarily friends and teammates aren't gathered together and tempted to socially interact for longer than maybe they necessarily should. But it's neighborhood-based, so people maybe who haven't met each other or know each other have an opportunity to feel connected by something, uniting, which is Wayfair, and have a halloumi sandwich, a hot dog, a burger from a food truck, a DJ that's playing music, but having these block parties in the different neighborhoods to keep the sizes of people who are gathering down, but then make people feel as if they're a part of something, even if it's maybe not the people they normally would hang out with and want to spend the most time with. In September, we fully recognize that we're going to need to reevaluate. We don't know what's going to be happening. We have hopes for all of these. And we also have a lot of ideas that we're trying to hold in the background as contingencies if we're not able to do some of these fun things that we want to do. Maybe we go around and start serenading people from the bottom of their apartments so that they can have a little bit of fun if we go back into a harder core lockdown. So in September, we plan on reevaluating and then planning and building for our fall activities and connection points. One of the other things that's super important on the functional side, outside of the fun, is really investing in our people and in ourselves. I'm sure as HR leaders, all of you are experiencing the same thing, But the one thing that we've been hearing the most about is people are overstressed. People are fearful of their jobs. People are fearful of the economy. And even if it's not top of mind, there's a low grade stress. One of the things that's been fascinating is how high productivity is for people that are working from home. But we're also seeing people who aren't shutting off. They're waking up at 7 in the morning, stressed, getting their coffee, sitting down at their computer and starting to answer those emails because somewhere subconsciously they feel like they have to, because they're scared, because everything around them is uncertain. One of the things that I think will help with that is giving people purpose, giving people something to build. We are living in an intangible world with an intangible disease that we can't touch, that we can't fight. It's important that people have something to grasp onto, and it's important that they have other people that they can grasp onto it with. One of the things that we've seen be incredibly emotionally fulfilling for our teams is when they've gotten to work cross-functionally on something semi-unrelated. So my thinking is that if we can design learning and development small programs for people where in groups of 3 to 5, they're working on a new skill, they're working on a new project, something that together they can create and achieve, it'll bring down some of that stress because it gives them something to hold on to and it gives them a routine. It also probably is giving them a new skill set and helping them to grow in their career, which is going to help them feel as if the organization cares about them, and maybe that they'll feel a little less insecure about their job. But all of this depends on your organization and how you're set up. And without chatting with each of you, I can't specifically talk to that. I can tell you about the things that Wayfair is doing, but what will be important is for you to design what makes sense for you. So I would encourage you to figure out who that team is that you're going to make a plan with. Sit down and have a wild, crazy brainstorming session. The #1 rule of brainstorming is that there's no such thing as a bad idea. Because even if maybe my idea is to go and lick every door handle in Berlin, maybe universally is identified as a really bad idea during a pandemic, it might spark a different idea from somebody else that could be implementable and could be successful for your teams. So encourage wild, crazy ideas, write them all down, and then take a look at what you think is potentially actually feasible for your organization, given the bandwidth that you have and the budget that you have. Design out those programs and then communicate. Because again, in a world of uncertainty, all people want and crave is information. And so that would be how I would encourage you to start thinking about your own COVID/post-COVID plans for your teams. Now, one of the questions that I was asked specifically for this presentation were, what were some of the blockers that I've experienced? And the reality is this picture for me says it all. And even just looking at this picture, I get stressed out. I'm like, it's white static noise. And that is the picture that embodies uncertainty for me. And when I think about my job over the past 3 months, which has been everything from figuring out how to build and design masks in mass to provide for our warehouse employees when we couldn't source masks anywhere in the world, to figuring out how to source hand sanitizer, to figuring out how to get groceries and medicine to our employees who were getting sick but couldn't leave their houses and didn't have a social network. All of a sudden, I and many people all over the world were being asked questions that nobody had the answers to. Nobody knew how to do things that we've all been asked to do. Every single one of us probably on this call has felt like you're making it up every single day. Every day you wake up and they're going, I don't know, what if we do this? And that's the most important thing for me, is that fear, insecurity, lack of confidence, those are the main blockers for designing whatever it is that your organization is going to need. And the most important thing is just that a decision gets made, and every day a step is taken forward, and that then it's communicated. But what everybody needs and what everybody's looking for is just some step forward. And so in those moments when you feel like, oh, I have no idea, it's okay. Nobody else does either. And just whatever idea you have, share that idea with other people. Maybe they'll come up with something better. Maybe they'll come up with something that you haven't heard about or have resources that you haven't been exposed to. I have not found any blockers with my executive team. I've not found blockers necessarily with budget. I've not found blockers with other teams who have conflicting interests. What I have found collectively is everybody is uncertain. And so the blocker is just that everybody's hoping, waiting that somebody else is going to have the answer. And it's okay for us all just to say, cool, none of us have the answer. Let's start guessing. Let's start designing. Let's start playing and figuring this out. There were some questions that were submitted prior to the talk that I wanted to address. What policies need to be updated as employees return to work? I have a policy booklet that I've now written up that's about 18 pages long, and it covers everything from wearing masks to what can you touch and not touch, and can you use conference rooms, can you not use conference rooms? For me, the simple answer here is probably every single one of them needs to be addressed and looked at through the lens of how can we keep our people as safe as possible, and what is our company's specific tolerance on this topic that we want to then introduce to our people. What is an employer obligated to do in a case of an employee who attends the office shows symptom of COVID-19? One of the things that we're doing as an organization is sending a daily reminder via Google Forms to every single employee who's working from the office, and it's a quick three question questionnaire. Are you feeling healthy this morning? Does anything feel strange? Should you come into the office? And it's just a quick mental reminder. One of the articles that I shared on the very second page specifically talked about how an emergency room hospital facilitator had seen his hospital survive just the thousands and thousands of influx of COVID cases. Now, yes, nurses and doctors are catching COVID at a very high rate, but as learnings have developed and proper PPE tools have been available, those numbers have been able to lower. And one of the thoughts that he felt really strongly about was that you needed to have a 4-point system. You needed to have a double check yourself system of waking up in the morning and saying, really, should I go into the work today? Do I really feel okay? Is this hay fever or is this a little bit strange? That people needed to be washing their hands, that people needed to be wearing masks. So there are all of these different steps that we can take to continue to protect ourselves as much as possible. The 4th point is social distancing on that. The next question was, shows symptoms of COVID-19 and got tested and waiting for results. I would say the minute that person didn't feel well enough to even think about a test, that person should be home. The minute somebody sneezes, you go ahead and you stay home. We've already proven, most likely, that most of your employees can work effectively at home. Don't risk it. Send them home. They can wait until they're better. 5 days, if they're showing normal symptoms and nothing's happening, no big deal. It was probably just a little sneeze, come on back. If they really didn't feel well enough that they got tested, 100%, you should wait at home until that test comes back. And for as long as you're not feeling well. Shows symptoms of COVID-19, got tested, oh, I already read that one, was tested positive. Sorry about that. So this is where tracing and tracking comes into place. And you've already seen this as you've gone out to restaurants and they've made you fill out the paperwork that you were at that restaurant. That is so that if somebody at that restaurant at that same time period is confirmed to have COVID-19, they can very quickly inform everybody else that is in that area. We will be doing the same thing for our employees. Every single day, they will be responsible. We will understand, because we're assigning the seats, who's in their wing, but they will be responsible for also saying anybody else that they potentially interacted with that day. Specifically, if they went out to lunch or coffee and interacted in a closer environment with somebody. So in short, if there's ever a question, stay home. stay home, work from home if you can. If you can't work from home because you don't feel well, you should be at home anyways. So stay home until you're well, until you have a test that says one way or the other, and then come on back. How do we talk with our teams about what we learned during stay-at-home period? How do we open up a reflection on this period? I think it's as simple as that. I think it's as simple as inviting people to have a conversation. I think it's totally fine for leadership to sit back and say, wow, that was difficult. We all experienced a lot of really hard things and a lot of emotions. Let's talk about that. And just having an open forum. I would suggest if you don't feel like somebody on your leadership team feels comfortable facilitating that conversation, potentially think about maybe your healthcare provider has a counselor that you can bring in to facilitate those conversations. I actually think that conversation is incredibly important for understanding how people are. The reality from, again, some of the research that I'm reading, there's a lot of information out there. The potential reality is that there's an emotional implication to everything that we've gone through that's gonna last for up to a year, the anniversary of when we feel like things have normalized, where people will continue to have reactions, because this is similar to kind of a grief process of the change that we've gone through. So I would definitely encourage you to open up times for just open, free conversation about how are people feeling? What did people experience? What could we learn from this together? How do we give our associates the feeling of being safe, and how do we communicate? So the first part, we've invited a few of our employees back to the office to kind of test out the office and tell us if they would feel safe enough to come back. We believe that we're actually taking an incredibly strict and stringent view. And we've talked to a bunch of other organizations in Berlin, and we're being a lot stricter than a lot of organizations are. But I think it's also important to test your employees and say, do you feel safe in the environment that we've set up? I told you earlier that 39% of our employees said that the #1 reason that they would want to come back to the office was social interaction. In that same survey, 32% of employees said that the #1 reason they wouldn't want to come back was they had no idea what we were doing to keep them safe. So communicating what actions you've taken and over and over and over again is going to be incredibly important. How do we communicate? I think this is the $1,000,000 question. I feel like I put on videos of like dancing squirrels and I get the highest view ratio of any communication that I ever put out. We also get the highest information absorption from what we call toilet papers, which are in the back of every stall that tell people the things we want to have them read. Unfortunately, we have not had access to people's personal stalls at home during COVID. But in all seriousness, the answer for me here is every channel that you have that you can use to communicate often and consistently, and communicate with your executive team at the highest level to make sure that people understand that this is important. So whether that's all hand meetings that are virtual that everybody participates in, whether that's official emails, whether that's reminders on Slacks, but I do think a multi-pronged approach using every communication channel that you have, but making sure that the message is consistent and the same so that people aren't getting confused. By when do I think everyone will return to the office on a regular basis? I have no idea. I don't even know if that is a reality. Until there's a vaccine, until there's collective scientific confirmation that we do not need to have social distancing in the way that we've been talking about it, I do not believe that our office spaces will ever be designed in the same way as they were before. They were too dense. In Germany, 15 square meters per person was the kind of legal recommended spacing. I don't know any tech company anywhere that had that kind of luxury. Most people were hovering around 10 and 11. US companies hover around 6 to 8. So I think it's incredibly important that we recognize that density in an environment where breathing particulates becomes unsafe will be the biggest hurdle. So I'm going to answer this honestly, static. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I just want to thank you all for having me and giving me this opportunity. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions that folks might have.
Thanks, Emily. That was a really insightful speech on how to make the employees safe on coming back to the office. Actually, we have a few questions coming from the Kenjo office, and also guys here still in the webinar. I see there's almost all of you still here. Please feel free to just type in your questions into the chat for us for Emily to answer. So a question from a Kenjo employee is, who should participate when creating the return to work plan? In your case, did you find any blockers with other teams?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I didn't find blockers from other teams because everybody's so hungry for an answer. And so if anything, everybody was so eager to participate, was so eager to be involved, to be part of the solution. Again, we are a large organization, and so I would say our COVID task force, depending on location, is actually quite large. And so we have representatives from legal, from HR, from finance, from community experience, and then we have different task force that are focused on different problems. So I'm part of the return to office task force, but I'm also in the keep the warehouses open task force. And then I'm part of the global task force to make sure that we have global consistency with the policies. So I think it's important to identify, depending on the size of your organization, who are the people who have strategic knowledge in the different areas that you're trying to address. It's important to have somebody who understands what the legal ramifications are if you tell your employees that they have to wear masks all the time, or that you tell them they don't have to wear masks all the time. Having obviously somebody represented from HR to understand the rights and responsibilities for our employees. Having somebody from facilities, if you are a large enough organization to have somebody who's thinking about that, who's thinking about how the janitorial teams are working with that space. Making sure finance understands that you might be raising significant POs for much higher cleaning costs than you might have done in the past.
I understand. And there's a question here coming from this participant on how to actually train employees to follow the precautions. How do you make sure that people don't only listen, but actually follow them through? Because we've seen a lot of, like in schools or on companies, where people know that what they're supposed to do, and they still end up being closely together in little meetings or lunch breaks or whatever. How do you make sure that people follow that?
And that was, you know, to my earlier point, I saw myself inclined to break all the rules as soon as I was put in that situation. Our janitorial company was saying that of the companies that they've already had kind of transition back, they were seeing people behave really, really well for about 5 days. And 5 days in, complacency and normality came back into play. Again, I'm not going to claim to have the answer on this. I think probably we should call up some kindergarten teachers and say, how do you get them to follow what you tell them to do? Again, for me, it's about designing the space specifically to encourage those behaviors and to limit those interactions. Our employees' key cards are shut off for any floor that they don't have permission to go to, which makes it a lot harder to sneak up to another floor and have a coffee date with a friend. We are encouraging that all of our conference rooms are not being used. And because we've split up teams, we're not expecting people to go into a conference room because they're not actually with their team on the same floor. So they have to do the video call. The coffee machines, we've shut down the areas that would force people to line up because there are always high traffic times. So of our floor plates, we've set up 3 coffee zones and 3 snack zones and 3 supply zones. And so we are estimating that about 5 people, fully granted that that is 5 out of a normal 40, who are going to be able to interact with that new snack zone so that it's limited. Now, of course, could they run over to somebody else's snack zone? Of course. Different companies are taking different ways of dealing with this. Some people are trying to gamify it. There are little squeaky toys that are about 4 cents each. They're the fillers for the ducks that you can get for the bathtubs. It's the refill for when your dog by accident rips one out and breaks it. Those are 5 cents each. And some companies are taking those and giving them to employees as a fun game of, hey, when somebody gets too close, give them a squeak. There are some companies who are investing in wearables, which vibrate when people get too close to each other, as just a reminder that they should be social distancing and not spending time in that proximity. Those are running about 55 euros per wearable, up to about 100 euros with significant data reports that you can get, all anonymized and GDPR compliant, of course, but it really depends on the threshold for that financial investment, but also for that direction that you want to go as a culture. We have not started testing it yet because we are just getting ready to invite business critical cases back to the office this week. But we are trying to go through a educate and trust approach. Probably educate, trust, and remind frequently approach versus trying to like truly control behaviors through wearable devices, because that's just not the culture that we want to have, where people feel like they're being watched, they're being monitored, they're being buzzed. And again, going back to the statistics, you know, we would also close things down and get more strict the higher the cases in any given territory or region are. And so as numbers are better, we can say, hey, we are very specifically saying, we understand that this is a little bit looser of a time, but note that if cases get up to X, Y, or Z, we may have to be a lot more strict about this.
Mm. Yeah, it's, I guess, also about autonomy or self-responsibility of the people, or the colleagues who are basically adults, and they also know what's exactly. Also, there's a question coming in, are you encouraging individuals coming to the office at different times to ease pressure on entry exits?
We will,
like
yes.
Per day.
Yes, so currently we have 16 requests out of 1,000 employees for access to the office. So it's such a low number at this period of time that we don't actually feel that we need to stagger entrance times. But yes, as soon as occupancy, and we do need to quickly run that math and figure out what that number is. So let's say it's 35 people all trying to get into the building at the 8:30 to 8:55 range. Obviously that will create some problems. And so then, yes, we would encourage some people. It's like, okay, here's your 8 a.m. slot, here's your 8:20 slot, here's your 8:40 slot, 9 o'clock slot. I have found that depending on the team, there is a nice wide breadth of entrance times that people like to adhere to. Sometimes finance likes to be there around 8, and sometimes engineers like to be there around 10. So I think that it is possible to space it out. Similarly with lunch, elevators. One of the other things that we're doing that I didn't mention is elevators up, stairs down. And so to make sure that we're not having tons of people in the elevators going back and forth and moving, people can take the elevators up to their floors, but then take the stairs down to exit out to help with that flow. But yes, the higher the occupancy of your space, the more shift type thinking and thinking about how many access points do you have. Currently in our building, we have a south side stairwell that's exit only for emergency exits. If we ever got to a place where we wanted to have higher occupancy levels and we had employees who were willing to get a little bit of exercise, we would encourage, you know, floors 2 through 4 to take those south side stairs to lower the the stress of the main entrance.
Mm-hmm. All right. Also, some participants ask, can you describe a tool that would make your life a lot easier in your job currently, but doesn't exist in the market right now? So basically, to make up a new tool, no, it's a communication tool. Is it a training tool, performance management tool? Like, what kind of tool are you using?
I mean, I feel like then I'd go and start a company if I had that good idea, right?
Yeah, it's a good business idea in crisis.
You know, we're definitely looking forward to, I would be very appreciative if the government would come out with an app that voluntarily allowed people to download and say how they're interacting with other people. And, you know, there are fun ways to gamify that, but then it's an individual's choice. And it's like your calorie tracker where it's like, oh, I did 16,000 steps today. Like, good job, me. It's like, oh, I was 36 minutes in closer proximity than I should have been. I could do better later. And there is a company that's actually, I forget the name of it, but I think it's an app out of India actually, where it does exactly that. And then you get points that you can like cash in for prizes. And so so many different countries are trying different things, and some things are accessible some places and have access others. And I would love, you know, what I would really love, it's not a tool. I would really love consistency of information, depending on what country you're in, masks or no masks, face shields or no face shields, distancing or no distancing, 14 days versus 7 days. You know, like, we haven't agreed as a globe yet on truth as it pertains to COVID-19. So like, one truth would be fabulous. I'd love that. And then I think gamifying behavior change would be where I would really want to see the market continue to develop, because that's the way we're going to be able to get people to invest in themselves and not have to be their caretakers and naggers, for lack of a better word.
No, absolutely. But also to the participant who just asked the question, I can recommend as an HR tool, of course, the Kenjo tool, because it does help a lot in terms of time tracking, making time tracking easier, as it's going to be a European law starting from next year to time track, and rather than just swiping or have an actual clock in, clock out machine or so, where people actually also need to like gather physically or touch it, it's best to do it automated online. And yeah, connect also through meetings, check what people are doing. These things can be done all online, rather than having lots of different sheets of Excels. To do it all in one tool is actually always a good idea, and helps a lot to save time on the admin task and getting more into the real important task for HR people. So if there's not more questions, and also again, you can contact Emily anytime. I will send out a follow-up email with this presentation and a PDF and a recorded version of this webinar. And in the PDF, there is the contact details of Emily. So you can reach out to her or to me. I will forward the questions. And then we like any questions that hasn't been discussed here, and you feel like you can't or you don't want to do it now, or there's not time anymore, because well, we've reached the end already to the webinar. It's 5:05, and yeah, just email us. Also, I wanted to thank you guys for lasting all the way to the end. It's almost all the people still are here from the very beginning. And also again, thank you very much, Emily, for taking your time out of your busy schedule to well, telling us or talking about what to do in these times. It's been really helpful, I think, in order for companies to prepare going back to work and making people feel safe actually going back into the offices. Also, in the follow-up email, you can contact me or Kenjo directly if you have questions for a free 14 days trial to test our tool. We are more than happy to help you, or you can sign up directly. Soon we will be doing another webinar really soon. We do that on a regular basis, once a month or every 2 months. And the next subject for the webinar will be a focus on mental health to help HR to know how to address conflicts in the office, which, as you said, HR offices tend to be sometimes more like a kindergarten than like adults. So it's really helpful to have the right tools to address that. And we look forward to hearing your feedback on the issues discussed here in the webinar and how we can help one another. So thanks, Emily, and thank you guys for staying. And yes, please drop us an email. I'd like to hear your feedback. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. Take care.
It was really nice. It was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Talk soon.
Ciao. Talk soon. Ciao.